certainly by the High Middle Ages, there were stories about times related to vampires, so that at dawn and at dusk and at midday, there were periods where their powers were either heightened or dampened. But overall, they were pretty much confined to the darkness.
As a furor over the undead raged across Europe, the Catholic Church was drawn into the fray. In the late 1400s, Pope Innocent VIII released a treatise recognizing the phenomena of shapeshifters and vampiric creatures.
So what would once maybe have been dismissed as a peasant superstition was now, hey, you know, it's right here. Well, here's what the fathers of the church are saying about this.
With support from the authorities, over the next few centuries, tens of thousands of werewolves and vampires would be unearthed and destroyed. The underworld of the undead would come to light, and a conflict between vampires and werewolves would begin.
Though lichens were fewer in number, the war itself had become more perilous, for the moon no longer held her sway. Older, more powerful lichens were now able to change at will. The weapons had evolved, but our orders remained the same. Hunt them down and kill them off, one by one.
The werewolves were tired of being treated as pets and servants, and literally revolted against the vampire.
We now return to Fang versus fiction. Many cultures report werewolves and vampires existing side by side, but most of our modern-day knowledge of them comes from the wild mountains of Europe.
We now know from our study of history and the history of the vampire and the werewolf that the two are intimately connected, particularly in Eastern Europe.
Certain Eastern European tradition holds that one can only become a vampire after being bitten by one. But how might vampirism really be transmitted? In an attempt to answer ancient questions about the undead, author Catherine Ramsland has turned to 21st century science.
I used the quote from Ben Helsing, "He who is not of nature has yet to obey nature's laws." If vampires could exist, how? In other words, we're in a universe that is run by scientific laws, so what scientific laws would apply to the existence of a vampire? How does a person transform into a vampire? What does science give us that can reveal some of the truths of that?
In her studies, Ramsland has looked at the latest research on DNA.
It doesn't make sense to me that the vampire would only transform at the level of the blood. They really must transform their brain, their cellular structure, how their psychology interacts with their cells.
Each of our traits, from height to hair color, is encoded in our DNA. So presumably something occurs during the transformation into a vampire that affects an individual's DNA, giving them superhuman strength, the ability to survive on blood, and incredible longevity. With their bite, vampires might be injecting a type of DNA that invades cells and rewrites their genetic identity, giving victims entirely new physical and behavioral characteristics.
And for that, I looked at this idea of junk DNA. Junk DNA being something that scientists don't yet understand, that's why they call it junk. Some of it acts in a vampiric way. It sucks off resources from others and reproduces quickly. It's like a virus.
If vampirism is a fundamental part of their DNA, it originally could have been a hereditary mutation occurring in one or more individuals centuries ago.
A warlord who came to power in the early seasons of the 5th century. Just in time to watch a plague ravage his village. He alone survived. He became the first true immortal. He fathered at least 2 children who inherited this same trait.
Some trace the hereditary roots of the vampire condition to the Romanian region of Transylvania. This is the homeland of Vlad Țepeș, better known as Vlad Dracula. The model for Bram Stoker's novel, the real Vlad was an actual 15th century overlord, infamous for his bloodthirstiness. Even today, local villagers remember him in song. While the fictional Dracula has warped our present-day notions of werewolves and vampires, there may be clues to the real truth hidden in the novel.
Hey, is there anything in your history having to do with a character called Dracula? Yes.
Nikolai Paduraru is the head of the Transylvanian Society of Dracula.
We know Vlad to have been born in 1431. We believe he was born in Sighișoara.
Vlad was named Dracula after his father, Vlad Dracul.
In Romanian, Dracula means devil.
He was given the title Țepeș, which means impaler, because of his love for impalement as a means of punishing his enemies. History suggests he had 20,000 captured Turkish soldiers impaled while he looked on from a banquet table.
There's again famous woodcut of Vlad sitting there eating lunch while, you got a whole crowd of his former friends sort of hanging there on these spikes.
Accounts of his cruelty assert that he once invited the poor, sick, and elderly to a banquet in his castle, and after feeding them, boarded up the castle and set fire to it. No one escaped. Other reports from the time describe how Vlad enjoyed drinking cups filled with the blood of his defeated enemies. He was overthrown in 1462 and forced to flee to the safety of the King of Hungary's court. It was there that he met a female relative of the Hungarian king, Matthias Corvinus.
In fact, Vlad married a sister of Matthias Corvinus.
But in order to marry her, Vlad had to convert from the Eastern Orthodox Church to Catholicism. According to tradition, anyone who left the Orthodox Church was believed to become a vampire. Vlad returned to Transylvania in 1474. He was murdered just 2 years later and buried at this monastery on the island of Snagov. But in a vampiric twist, no body was found in his tomb when it was opened. Some believe that today's vampires and werewolves are descendants of the mysterious Corvinus clan.
People ask us, well, do you know what a vampire is? And we reply, yes, we think we know. They say, why don't you publish it? Why don't you put it on the internet for everyone to know? And we reply, because you wouldn't understand.
The sons of the Corvinus clan. One bitten by bat, one by wolf, one to walk the lonely road of mortality as a human. It's a ridiculous legend.
It was during the era of Vlad Țepeș that a major event in the history of werewolves and vampires is said to have occurred. Gypsy Zanval has extensively researched the history of werewolves.
There was a battle in the year 1412, according to legend. The werewolves and the vampires had a war.
We were slaves once. The daylight guardians of the vampires. I was born in servitude.
Vampires are extremely, by nature, snooty. We are the top of the food chain, blah, 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 and everybody else is beneath us. Werewolves are just men who can turn into animals, so therefore they're pets. They can move our coffins during the day and protect us during the night, but they're just like having a big dog in your yard.
The werewolves mutinied against their status as servants, and a fierce war ensued.
The werewolves were tired of being treated as pets and servants, and literally revolted against the vampire. The wolven clans in America and Europe, still to this day, do not trust or like vampires.